You pay your Verizon bill every month, so why did a collection tank your credit score? This video will show you how to dispute inaccurate items on your credit report, including Verizon collection accounts. Hi, I'm Tom Christiano of YourFairCreditLawyer.com. With me is Hugo Blankingship, my law partner. This video is going to discuss how to deal with collection accounts from Verizon and other utilities. Hugo, are there problems with Verizon and utilities like Verizon on their credit scores?
Absolutely, Tom. There's lots of them. Here's how it sort of works with a lot of these utility companies. They don't report every month. So if you make your payments on time every month, guess what? You don't get any credit for it. The only time they're going to report it is when something goes bad or at the end of the account. So when you cancel them and you change services, maybe you're going from Verizon to Cox or AT&T, somebody like that, that's when the problems start. We've seen a lot of those problems, haven't we?
We have. They're notorious. Verizon and other utilities are notorious for inaccurate credit reporting because their billing systems don't match up with their credit reporting systems. And as you mentioned, they don't report every month. So that's why I feel like they don't get it accurate, is because they're not reporting every month, oh, a consumer paid their $300 bill or their $150 bill every month. They don't report every month. So therefore, the data is inconsistent, and inconsistent data leads to inaccurate credit reporting. Right, Hugo?
Yeah, but it's not just the data in the account that you actually opened. They have a lot of problems with identity theft and opening accounts, because they're usually small accounts that somebody didn't open, and now you've got an identity theft problem. So with these utility companies, particularly like Verizon, you can have problems with the billing service at the end of the account, or you can have it at the front end when the account is just opened with identity theft problems.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned identity theft. If you think about it, there's many stores that open up utility accounts for cell phones and other utilities, and they're not going to require the same kind of data or identity verifications of, say, a mortgage or a bank loan. So the identity thief has a target to go into the Verizon store, to go into the utility store, and to provide a name and address, maybe not even a social security number. Because Verizon and the other utilities, they know ultimately they can turn off the account, they can turn off the service, and they're going to limit their liability on the front end. And they'll just ruin the victim's credit report by leaving thousands of dollars of charges for an account that the victim never opened. That's the real problem with identity theft for Verizon, I think, Hugo.
Yeah, you definitely have that. And then there's another crazy problem with these guys is that unlike a bank or other furnishers of credit information to the credit reporting agencies, these agencies like Verizon and Cox and other ones, they escalate their problems to collection status right away. Now, collection is normally something that happens like after you're 180 days past due. You're seriously delinquent. But we've seen accounts with Verizon where people are just barely 30 days past due, and they say they've gone to collection and now their credit has been tanked. We've seen plenty of these examples, haven't we?
We have. And with one particular case that I just thought was ridiculous is Verizon's representative. Remember, they want to look like they have good customer service. So the Verizon representative actually told our client, don't pay your bill. Don't pay it yet. Let us figure out how much you owe. And then after we figure out how much you owe, then you can pay. Well, the client listened to Verizon and waited to pay. And lo and behold, Verizon just turned them into collections anyway and said, well, you didn't pay. And the whole account record history said, you never even gave me an accurate bill to pay. How am I supposed to deal with this? How am I supposed to pay you when you're charging me for things I didn't receive and you told me not to pay? Yet you're going to trash my credit anyway. And the problem with the collection account, like you mentioned, it goes immediately to one of the most significant derogatory events you can have. And then the next thing you know, your credit score is down 120 points.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to that client. She was barely 30 days late while she was waiting for Verizon to get her the final bill. They immediately go to collection, and then when she disputed it, they refused to correct it. It was awful. But that isn't the only kind of problems that we've seen with Verizon. We had another crazy one where a customer had Verizon. She was moving. She moved to a new house, and she said, I want to use your service again. Please transfer it to my new residence. They said, fine. They started sending her bills, but the problem was that Verizon didn't service that area. She had to go get a different servicer, but Verizon kept sending her bills. She disputed it. Verizon said, oh, yeah, you're right. I'll take it off. And guess what happened the next month? What happened the next month, Tom?
They took it off.
They put it back on. They kept sending her bills. They kept sending her new bills. And she kept saying, hey, I don't even have your service. And they kept charging her. That one was crazy.
It was great. It was so crazy I didn't remember.
We've also had some pretty bad identity theft ones. Remember those?
I do remember it was a young couple and they were trying to establish their lives together. And unfortunately, a cell phone was opened in the wife's name that she never opened. And it goes back to the front end problem with Verizon, where they don't necessarily have all the data they need, or they're not requiring as much identification as other lenders will require to open an account, because their incentive is to open the account and they always have the safety to turn off the service. That's why they know their loss is going to be limited. And if $1,000 charge off goes on to somebody else's credit report, well, that's not Verizon's problem now, is it, Hugo?
No, it wasn't. And that was another sort of crazy one. The consumer lived in Virginia and the identity thief was in California. They sent out a phone to a phony address in California. The phone was used twice, a total of 2 minutes, and they never heard from it again. And our customer said, "Hey, that's not me. I didn't have anything to do with it. I've got a different account. I've got AT&T." But they never took it off.
So the good news is there's a mechanism to report or to dispute inaccurate information on your credit report from Verizon or other banks or entities that report. Now, under the Act, these entities are known as furnishers. Furnishers have a different duty when it comes to the Fair Credit Reporting Act. They have an independent duty to the Consumer Reporting Agency. Now, the trip and trap for most consumers is they will dispute directly with the entity disputing the information, directly with them saying they didn't open the account or that the account is reporting inaccurately. Unfortunately, due to the structure of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, in order to protect your liability or protect yourself from their liability, you need to dispute first with the Consumer Reporting Agency, who in turn will notify the furnisher of the information of the inaccuracy. The good news is that provides two mechanisms. You could sue the Consumer Reporting Agency or the furnisher of the information, but the bad news is that many consumers get it incorrect and only dispute with the furnisher, which unfortunately doesn't protect your rights, right, Hugo?
Yeah, you've got under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you have an obligation, or if you want to get it right, you have to send it to Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Not for, say, in this example, Verizon. You can send it to Verizon all you want. If they don't fix it, you don't have a cause of action. But if you send it to Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, and they don't fix it, well, you have got a cause of action against those three as well as Verizon. So you need to know the rules. And if you watch our first video on how to dispute, that'll help you. And the other thing you can do is you can contact a credit reporting lawyer that knows what they're doing, and they can help you walk you through this process as well.
That really is the key, Hugo, is to contact experienced lawyer to deal with inaccurate credit reporting. The furnishers do have a duty to investigate, as we said, but they also have a duty to get it right and to correct it, and to notify the Consumer Reporting Agency that the information has been corrected. They can't just tell one, they need to tell all, right?
Yeah, and what we see is this loop of information. So say in this example, Verizon's saying that you open the account. Well, you dispute it with Equifax. Equifax says, oh, the consumer's disputing that they didn't open the account. And Equifax isn't going to conduct an investigation. They send it to Verizon. They don't conduct an investigation. They just say, well, that's the information we have, that this consumer owes the money. So it's a constant loop, and that's why it doesn't come off. It's a real problem.
And if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Verizon provides the inaccurate information. Equifax reports the inaccurate information. And then they ask Verizon, hey, this data that you gave me that somebody else says is wrong, is it wrong? And of course, Verizon's going to say it's not wrong, because if they thought it was wrong, they probably wouldn't give it to them in the first place. The data from Verizon will match the data at the Consumer Reporting Agency. And part of the dispute reinvestigation process is forcing somebody internally at Verizon to go back and look at all the records, all the information available to Verizon, and make sure it can correct the data so the data gets corrected on the front end that gets reported to Equifax. That's how you truly solve the problem, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, if you actually did it. But the problem is that none of them are actually doing it. They outsource it to somebody else. They have different companies that they hire to process these disputes, and they don't trust them. They don't trust them to get it right. So if you dispute something, the chances of it coming off are not very good. I mean, it does occasionally, but it's very rare. And in most of the cases that we see, consumer can be absolutely right, whether they're talking about a billing error or identity theft or something like that, but it's not coming off, is it?
It's not. And the good news is experienced FCRA lawyers know that the furnisher has to do more than what's called a data conformity review. They have to conduct a reasonable reinvestigation that looks at the underlying records, that looks at how the account was opened, and looks at the charges on the account. That's what's supposed to happen. But as you mentioned, when they outsource this investigation to save money, it really isn't going to result in the accurate credit report for a consumer. It's just going to result in more frustration and aggravation for the consumer, especially as you mentioned in the one case we had where Verizon didn't even provide services at that address and the person was receiving charges.
Yeah, and the thing that most consumers don't understand is even a small error or small collection account. If Verizon could say, oh, well, you owe me $20 and you didn't pay at the end of the term, that can cause you a huge amount of damage. They're going to say you're late. They're going to say you're going into collection. And next thing you know, there's a $20 dispute and you're over 100 points down on your credit score. So you went from top tier credit to third or fourth tier credit. It's remarkable how fast you can fall with just the smallest amount of a credit reporting error.
One small account really does cause a lot of damage because of the way the credit scoring models are set up. Now, this information on credit scoring models is proprietary information, but it's also well known on the internet. Recent derogatory charges cause a lot more havoc with your credit score than older charges. So when you have a recent Verizon collection account that's inaccurate, you can see your credit score drop 100, 150 points virtually overnight. And that can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars if you apply for a mortgage or other credit, right, Hugo?
No, it's huge. The amount of damage, your insurance goes up. You might have other credit card accounts that are going to get canceled, or the credit limit's going to go from maybe $10,000 to $2,000. There's a huge amount of damage that can be caused just by one little small account. It's hard to believe, but it's true. And the problem is that they're just not going to fix it. Every one of these cases we've seen against Verizon, the consumers disputed it and it didn't get fixed. It didn't get fixed until they called us. And when they called us, we got it fixed.
Yeah, and the beauty of calling us is there's no charge to talk to us on the phone. We can hear your fact pattern and talk about your situation.
We can hear about your situation. We can help you figure out how to dispute it the best way possible. And when it doesn't come off, because it probably isn't, then we can file a lawsuit on your behalf. Now, the beauty of this is that under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you don't have to pay a lawyer. The legal fees might be really high, but you're not going to be responsible for them. We can take these cases on a contingency fee or percentage fee basis, and that way we can give you the legal response that you need, the legal support that you need, and you don't have to come out of pocket to pay any of the legal fees. And that's how we get it fixed, isn't it?
That is how we get it fixed, and it's a relief for our clients when they call us and they know they can talk to us without worrying about what charge is going to be made and am I paying for this telephone call to the lawyer, because ultimately the Fair Credit Reporting Act authorizes the recovery of attorney's fees. It authorizes damages for the consumer, and it can authorize punitive damages in the case of willful violations of the act. So what do you think, Hugo? Can we get to willful violations? How would we prove a willful violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act?
Well, what we generally do is we look at what the investigation or reinvestigation was, what they did, and whether or not they followed their procedures. We usually find that because they outsourced it and they didn't trust the people they sent it to, that they're not following any procedures. They're simply going through the motions. They know what they're doing, and these companies don't want them to fix it, because they don't trust them. They would rather leave it on and take their chances with them than have them go and fix it and take it off.
That's for sure, Hugo. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act authorizes different damages, including actual damages, statutory damages, and punitive damages. Actual damages can include emotional distress damages for the frustration and aggravation that a consumer goes through in order to fix their credit report. How can a consumer prove their emotional distress damages, Hugo? What mechanism do we use in the cases?
Well, we usually use a family member that is going to be able to testify and say exactly what happened and what they observed. And they usually observe a lot of frustration, upset, sleepless nights, loss of appetite, sometimes even loss of hair. And we've seen a lot of actual physical damages that people have suffered.
We sure have. And one of the things I enjoy when I represent victims of inaccurate credit reporting is you can see the weight on someone's shoulder. You can hear the tension in their voice, because credit impacts every aspect of our life. If you go to rent a car, your credit report may be pulled. If you go to buy a house, security clearance for a job, these are real world problems that cause a tremendous amount of stress for consumers if there's inaccuracies in a credit report. And it's good to know that the damages of the Fair Credit Reporting Act are there for them to protect them and to compensate them for inaccurate items on their credit file.
And it's important that consumers have an ability to retain a lawyer and go after these companies for not doing what they're supposed to do under the Act. Congress set it up with the intent to ensure maximum possible accuracy. Maximum possible accuracy. That's really high. And that's what they're supposed to do, but they don't because it's expensive. And we understand that they're paying 12 cents per investigation. 12 cents. What kind of investigation you think you're going to get for 12 cents? It ain't much, is it, Tom?
You're not going to get much for 12 cents in this world. But it really goes back to the incentives. They're not incentivized to give accurate reporting. They're incentivized to report what the furnisher, what Verizon wants them to report on the credit file. If you think about it, if an identity thief has stolen $900 of services from Verizon, they're never going to get paid from the thief. The only way they're going to get paid is if they park that debt on the victim's credit report, hold up a mortgage, and then make it so that the only way to get a mortgage approved is to pay the $900 off to Verizon. There are stories that happens, and we don't recommend people pay identity theft debts that are not theirs.
Don't pay identity theft debts. Definitely don't ever do that. Contact a lawyer. But if you want to avoid a problem with Verizon or Cox or one of those people, if there's a dispute over a couple $100, pay the bill. Pay it up front. You can collect the money back later, but don't let it get to the point where it gets on your credit report because that's going to take some time and that's going to be really frustrating for you. So my advice is, if you get a Verizon bill and you dispute it and you think that it's not accurate, but you do actually owe them some money, pay the thing in full. You agree with that?
I do agree with that. That's good advice, Hugo. And other advice I would give would be when you're at the back end of your relationship with a utility like Verizon or any other utility company, keep good records.
Yeah.
Go ahead when you go in and you turn in your router or you terminate your service and turn in your router. When you turn in your router, you're going to want to keep that receipt. When you terminate your services, maybe make some notes of who you spoke to and what they said and how much they said you owed and would pay. So you have some mechanism to go back when you go to write a dispute letter and say, I spoke to this rate agent on this date and they said pay $422 and I paid it right away. Here's my canceled check. These are facts that would go in a credit dispute letter. Here's my receipt for where I returned the router. I returned the router in November and they put a charge off on my account in December. It gives you tangible proof that the information is inaccurate. And that's what's ultimately going to protect your credit and provide for a good credit dispute letter.
Yeah, they allow you to mail stuff back into them. They send you labels and stuff, and you can put it on a box and send it to them. My advice would be to actually physically go to a Verizon store and drop it off and get a receipt from them showing that you did drop it off, because we've seen customers who've had problems with equipment at the end of the account and they get billed for it and they had actually turned it back in, but there was no evidence of it.
Now think about it. If we go back to where we were on the statute, so the dispute goes to the credit reporting agency and then the credit reporting agency notifies Verizon of the problem. If you have created a proper record, then the investigation of your credit dispute should involve going back into those file notes and seeing that you did speak to the agent, seeing what the agent said, seeing that you did pay the money. There is a receipt for the router. The bad news is, not to be cynical, Verizon's credit report dispute investigation people are not going to look at all those records. But the good news is they're going to be there. So if you get involved with litigation against a furnisher and you point it out in a dispute letter and they didn't look at it, that's just the kind of situation that could lead to punitive damages.
It is. And one thing I'll say about Verizon is they do keep good records. If you go in there, their account notes and file notes, and we'll subpoena them and we'll get them. And it's going to show exactly what happened. So make sure you call and make sure you make notes when you call people and say, hey, I'm calling to get this bill straightened out. Get their name. And that way you can verify right with them exactly what happened and when it happened.
The better the records, the better the dispute letter, the better we can help you in the end. So we're a team. We have to work with the client and take their information and put them in the best situation to fix their credit and recover compensation.
Don't let your credit be damaged by one of these utility companies, whether it's Verizon or Cox or any gas company. Stay on top of it. And if it doesn't get fixed and it goes on your credit report, take action promptly. And you're probably going to need to call a lawyer. Don't you think?
I do, Hugo. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Please view our other videos on inaccurate credit reporting, automobile leases, and identity theft. In the meantime, take care of your credit and dispute any inaccuracy.
and we'll see you next time.